Y'all ever have a game you weren't sure was real? Something you had a vivid memory of, but no real concrete info about, so you would just pass it off as something you made up? That was Torin's Passage for me, a game I played briefly somewhere, though where is something I'll explain later. For the longest time I thought I'd just made it up. That was until I bumbled my way into it online one day, and then forgot again, losing it to my memory once more. It was always in the back of my mind though, this memory itching to be known. You see, Torin's Passage is an adventure game from Sierra by Leisure Suit Larry creator Lowe. It's about the main character Torin and his cartoon sidekick Boogle trying to hunt down whomever it was that trapped his parents in Crystal. It's a game defined by its saturated colors and goofy cartoon antics, while also trying to be a fantasy story in the vein of its King's Quest predecessors. Its bright colors, bizarre comedy, and wacky cartoon characters were very much targeted at a younger audience, but those exact details are exactly what made me think I'd fabricated it in my memory. I would always think, nah, it's too weird to be real, and just push it aside. I eventually stumbled upon it again, several years back, this time on GOG's storefront. I picked it up there and remembered playing it a few years back and thinking it was okay. So I played it again for the sake of recording video for this project, only to realize my feelings were a lot messier than I expected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So to try to keep from getting too lost in the weeds with Sierra Entertainment's history, because there's a lot, I'll paint you the broad strokes leading up to this point before getting more into detail with the game's history. Sierra first got its start back in 1979. Ken and Roberta Williams, the founders, at this point had 2 children, and Ken Williams was working at IBM as a programmer. Ken Williams decided to found Sierra, which at the time was Online Systems, with the intention of making business-oriented software in an effort to keep their family afloat. Luckily for them, this plan wouldn't last. One day, he brought home a teletype terminal and eventually came across Colossal Cave Adventure in the program catalog. He decided to have his wife Roberta join him in playing it, and she ended up going all in on it. Using their newly purchased Apple II, Roberta started mainlining text adventures, and it lit a spark in her. She wanted something more than just text with her adventures and put her creativity to the test, penning their first adventure game, Mystery House, with the help of Ken Programming. It was released in 1980, and though the game was only available through mail order, it sold around 15,000 copies. This was just the start they needed, and they would start hammering out a flurry of games over the next few years. But we're not here to talk about them. We just needed our foundation for the person we really want to talk about, Lowe. Lowe was a man who loved music. He used his passion to get a degree in teaching so he could become a music teacher. While the shift to being a teacher was a largely pragmatic one, it gave him and his family much needed stability. He would also frequently set up and manage music festivals, including alongside his wife Margaret with the groups that she was involved in. The music festivals themselves were frequently competitive affairs that needed to be scored by hand. One day Al decided he wanted to try programming a way to automate the scoring. He approached a coworker at school who more or less went, yeah, nobody really uses BASIC to program around here, so have this big old book of BASIC to learn something from so you can do it yourself. Instead, the book would just sit there collecting dust at his place, but not for terribly long. At one point, his son, who was in kindergarten, got chickenpox, which would lead to Al contracting it as well. After a week though, his son had recovered and got sent back to kindergarten, but Al was stuck at home now, with nothing to do because he still needed another week to be sure he was pox-free. While bored out of his gourd, he decided to pore over the BASIC book. He'd always had a passion for electronics, a nerd if you would. Home computing was just a logical next step for him. He ended up having his wife bring home a remote terminal and took to it like a fish to water. Eventually, when the Apple II came out, he managed to convince his wife to let him spend a month's salary on it, promising he would find a way to make it pay for itself, which he inevitably would and then some. He started making a handful of edutainment games in the vein of Sierra games at the time because he loved playing those with his son. The Williamses would pick up on this because when Al finally met Ken at Applefest in 1982, Ken would start publishing Al's edutainment games through Sierra. The Williamses eventually brought Al into the fold as a programmer and designer, ending his 15 years as a music teacher and starting his career at Sierra. He began there programming and designing a handful of Sierra's Disney-licensed games, particularly Donald Duck's Playground, Winnie the Pooh and the 100-Acre Wood, and most notably The Black Cauldron. Unfortunately, due to creative disputes, lackluster sales for licensed games at the time, and poor profit sharing on Disney's part, Sierra would let those licenses fall through rather than renewing them. Al himself would continue working at the company, being a sort of jack of all trades in the meantime. If a game needed music, like King's Quest II, he would compose for it. If it needed programming, he would do it like with King's Quest III and Police Quest 1. Heck, even his wife composed for King's Quest III. He would eventually get his own shot at leading a project when he got the chance to make something all his own. His big claim to fame, Leisure Suit Larry. In 1987, Al was given free rein to make something from the ground up. It was Al's first shot at doing a properly adult-oriented title, and to indulge his love of comedy as well. The main character was based loosely off the protagonist of Sierra's older title, Soft Porn Adventure, including having one scene that aped its infamous box art. Al mentioned to the Williamses how sleazy the protagonist was, and how all he was missing was a leisure suit. This would be the basis for the series' down-on-his-luck schlub of a protagonist, a real ladies' man, or so he'd have you think, Larry Laffer. The games were raunchy adult comedies, largely poking fun at how much of a loser Larry was, and how greasy and sleazy he was. The games and their humor were very much of their time, and they certainly show their age at this point, but they never really hid their fangs, which were so rightfully pointed at Larry. This helped them age slightly better than you'd think. Not perfectly though, because they're still full of misogyny, and some transphobia, and homophobia too. Unfortunately for Al, Leisure Suit Larry and the Land of the Lounge Lizards admittedly sold poorly on release. It would be a hot minute before it picked up a proper following and gained in popularity. In the meantime, he'd do more work as needed around the company, including heading up the Cavalry Programmers. These were a collective of programmers cobbled together at the company, so King's Quest IV could ship out the door in time for Sierra to go public in hopes of boosting their stock. But after insane amounts of crunch, and even using a nearby motel as a glorified barracks, they were able to ship it in time for its September launch window. Eventually, the Leisure Suit Larry franchise would pick up speed, and Al got the opportunity to pump out 4 more Larry games. Larry's 2, 3, 5, and 6, as well as Freddy Farkas' Frontier Pharmacist. Now we approach the game we're talking about today, Torin's Passage. As of 1993, King's Quest games were taking increasingly long to produce, coming out every other year at this point. Ken Williams wanted something fantasy that was kid-oriented, similar to the King's Quest series, to be released in the off years for the franchise. To this end, he approached his buddy Al and proposed the idea to him, which Al would go on to accept. Soon after that, to quote Al himself,
Torin's Passage is a game I wrote in 1994 after watching the film Mrs. Doubtfire with my daughter. I realized during that film that the audience was laughing in 2 different pitches. High little giggles when the kids laughed at the slapstick parts of the film, and deep knowing guffaws when the adults caught something they knew the kids wouldn't get. I thought, why isn't there a computer game that my 9-year-old daughter and I could play that works like that? So I created one.
And so he did. Al Lowe had a 5-game storyline he wanted to make with the intention of covering the entirety of Torin's life, as an orphan, as a prince, as a ruler with a challenge to his authority, and up to him finally passing away from old age. Torin's Passage will be the beginning of it all, showing Torin's growth from upstart teen to him learning that he is the prince of a kingdom and not just some farmer's child. Unfortunately, this start would also be the end of the series as well. It's a shame too, because it leads to the game itself having a lack of a conclusion and a bunch of dangling plot threads. You see, around this time, Sierra had undergone a hostile takeover by CUC International. Hey, cuck. What happened is Cuck International leveraged their overinflated stock to buy out Sierra stock. They then ousted Ken from his creative role, leaving him to languish in a purely administrative position. The company itself would be under new management, who were much more conservative in terms of their vision, which would be a big hit to creativity in the company. The suits preferred chasing trends over proper creative work. This also meant that despite selling 200,000 copies, Torin's Passage wasn't successful enough for the suits, and it wouldn't get renewed for further games. Al didn't take it well, but would still be able to go on to create his magnum opus, Leisure Suit Larry 7, Love for Sale. It was the raunchiest, the funniest, and the best looking Larry yet. It was everything he could have wanted, but it was also tragically the last one he'd be able to do. Also, fun Torpo fact, I actually played it as a kid. I worry it might have been formative. After Love for Sale shipped, he'd basically get jerked around by the suits as he tried to secure funding and resources for Larry 8. These would eventually materialize, but all too late. Instead, Lowe and everyone at the campus where their original headquarters was got laid off in the infamous Chainsaw Monday, as coined by Scott Murphy of Space Quest fame. Cuck decided to lay off over 250 staff all at once in February of 1999. utterly wrecking the creative part of Sierra beyond repair, and instead shifting things over to purely publishing. God, this feels familiar. Lowe would take this opportunity to move with his family to Seattle and retire, spending his time instead taking care of his funny little humor website, and also playing saxophone for various jazz bands in the area. There would be some justice, albeit a little too late, because the big names behind Cuck, including Walter Forbes and Kirk Shelton, and a few other notable members of the company would be taken to court and found guilty of conspiracy to commit securities fraud. They'd cook their books to inflate their stock prices, so they could use that as leverage to buy up other companies' stocks. They would eventually get caught doing this by the US government, and would eventually go to jail and also be forced to pay restitutions for the rest of their lives. None of it was perfect, and there's something to be said about the size of the payments, but at least it was something. More than anything these days. But Torpo, you might ask. Torpo, how was the game? I was just about to get to that. Have a little patience. So I'm going to be upfront and real with y'all. I'm going to be a bit more critical of this than I was of Noctropolis, because something about this just didn't click with me, despite it being my third time playing the game. But I have an idea as to why, and I'll discuss that at the end of this. First though, let's talk about gameplay. It's a point-and-click adventure game in the vein of its Sierra progenitors, particularly King's Quest, though Lowe does bring in his Leisure Suit Larry experience too. In particular, it apes King Quest VII with its use of the more cartoony animation style, lack of any real fail states, scrolling background, and an episodic presentation broken up by defined areas you can hop between at the main menu. Now, unlike earlier adventure games, the actual interactions are pared down significantly, because everything you do is through left-clicking your mouse. It's concise and simple, but I find it a bit lacking in charm because right-clicking only gives you the name of objects in your inventory. No description or anything, but you get cool pre-rendered graphics of every item in your inventory. The puzzles themselves are kind of all over the place in terms of making sense. Some are simple and straightforward, others are just pure nonsense. It's mostly saved by the fact that all areas past the first two are very linear with their puzzles. Like item, puzzle, and so on. The first area is open, the second area is mostly open, but after that it's a straight line with the puzzle solving. The game also has a built-in hint system that subtracts a point if you use it. Because none of the puzzles in the game are optional, it's the only way to lose out on points. The points are just typical Sierra scoring and don't actually do anything, so it's not a huge loss anyway. You know, if you're casual. There's also Boogle, the cartoon companion. He exists mostly to add a second inventory and toss out the occasional gag, and honestly, I found him pretty charming. Sometimes he's genuinely funny, but other times he's just kinda there for flavor. Boogle also just sort of exists. They never explain him, he just is. He's a truly foul and beautiful creature. And then there's Asthenia, but we'll cover that when we get to it. Now, as far as the writing goes, it's somehow both the game's greatest weakness and its strength. Some of the gags are funny, some just go on way too long, and others were dated before the game even came out. The overall story is supposed to be a coming-of-age story about a prince, Torin, lost at birth trying to save his adoptive parents. Problem is, it's just kinda tonally inconsistent, and honestly, he never really grows as a character. Everything just kinda happens around him. Sometimes he's the straight man to Boogle, other times he goes all in on the gags, but as a person, he feels largely unchanging. In my personal opinion, I feel it's trying way too hard to conform to the King's Quest mold and suffers for it. To top it all off, it feels unfinished. There are plot threads thrown every which way, but most don't resolve, including the love subplot that just kinda peters out with no conclusion. This I won't place on Al, but instead Cuck International, because this was originally meant to be the first in a series of 5 games, but the suits over there gave up on the fledgling series all too quickly. Now, the sound design is absolutely solid, everything sounds right and clear, and it all lends itself to the contrasting environments really well. For all its wackiness, nothing sounds out of place, and it does bring it all together. The soundtrack itself is fine, it's solid enough, but unintrusive and largely goes unnoticed. Not quite ambient, but nothing I'd listen to on its own, but it's good enough for establishing the vibe. The voice acting is pretty on point. Michael Shapiro in particular, who voices both Torin and Boogle, slams it out of the park. Fun fact, Michael Shapiro would go on to voice the G-Man in the Half-Life games, which threw me for a loop when I learned it. He does a great job selling the hapless upstart Torin and the wacky sidekick Boogle, and if I didn't see his name in the credits, I'd never have known he was both of them. Man's got range. But even Mike aside, the voice acting is pretty good overall. The problem is, the game is all or nothing with the voiceovers. It's either talking your ear off, or just dead silence with little in between. Now, with the art and animation, I'm of two minds. The backgrounds are lovingly rendered and absolutely stunning. They are so good looking. They're all beautifully painted and really help sell the fantastical vibe, almost alien even, of the game and its many strange lands. It would be nothing without them. The backgrounds really help separate and define each of the unique worlds you go through, and no two worlds are alike. I love them so much, and they were definitely one of my favorite parts of the game. The animation, on the other hand, is kind of all over the place. It's trying to be this wacky cartoony style, while at the same time emulating Disney movies, but I personally don't think it does either particularly well. It's not bad, but characters are frequently off-model, and at times bizarrely animated, and have a vibe similar to CDI Legend of Zelda games in terms of the strange angles and animation. It's not bad, just inconsistent. It does look pretty good at some points though, like during the normal gameplay bits, his animations are pretty good, but some of the cutscenes can get kinda rough. Still better than King's Quest VII. My feelings on the game are very complicated and messy, and while I don't hate the game by any stretch, something about it just didn't click with me, but we'll get into that over the course of this video. For now though, a story to convey my feelings about this game and my relationship with it. While this intro plays out, let's talk a bit about my history with the game and the people that were around it for me. So back when I was a kid, we knew a gelatinous cube we'll call Uncle B. Uncle B wasn't related to us by blood, but was a friend of the family. A friend of my dad's in particular. He worked for my parents at their dungeon and got along with everyone pretty well from what I remember. At the same time, it's not like I'm gonna pretend my memory of my childhood is perfect, because there's huge chunks I can't remember, due to a combination of health problems, personal problems, and medicines taken over the years. Either way, he got along with us well enough, and at one point or another moved to somewhere not super far, but far enough for regular trips to be inconvenient. Every so often my family would go to visit him as a bit of a day trip, and we'd spend the time at his place. I even remember his son, who was much older than me, but got along with me and my siblings well enough. When we were there, we'd also be allowed to play games on the computer there alongside his son, who was happy to help. One time we went to visit when I was fairly young, and I remember playing a strange, colorful, fantastic game. It was a game too wacky, cartoony, and surreal for my kid brain to believe. I remember thinking it was pretty fun and interesting, but never quite got the name of it. I would instead just vividly remember a certain area of the game. Eventually we had to head home, and unfortunately I would go on to completely forget the name of Torin's Passage for a long time. At the same time, not too long after, my family stopped talking to Uncle B and his family entirely. It wouldn't be until I was in my late teens when I would even think to ask about it at all. Also, please trust me, I'm going somewhere with this, but for now, the game. Our game starts with a long animated cutscene, which as you can see is a crunchy video about a baby who can't sleep and his parents passed out in bed. Also, a weird, plant-shaped incense burner thing. The baby starts crying, so his red-headed nanny walks in to save the rich parents from having to wake up and take care of him. She walks outside to rock him to sleep, while everything gets increasingly ominous. While that's happening, we frequently cut to what is very obviously an evil-looking wizard man doing obviously evil wizard things. He eventually fills the incense burner with evil magic, and out comes some snake spirit thing that proceeds to seemingly end the lives of the mother and father. The nanny quickly realizes the vibes are absolutely atrocious, and absconds with the baby to protect them from the evil snake. Hard cut to a young man getting ordered around by his elderly father and given a simple task to go out and take care of. His kind elderly mother sends him off as well, reminding him to be home in time for dinner, firmly establishing the family dynamic. Our hero, Torin, is joined by the weird cartoon sidekick Boogle, who's happily napping, and they're off on their errand. Torin then waxes on about how there's gotta be more to life and how he wants to do more with his life instead of rotting in this quiet town. Honestly, I relate more than I care to. As they crest the hill, there's an evil magic cyclone in the shape of a large woman. This turns his parents to green crystal, much to his horror. He rushes back and is approached by a clearly evil man who is somehow unaffected by the whirlwind. The strange man tells Torin about how his parents were turned to crystal by an evil sorceress by the name of Essentia, who was banished to the lands below for her heinous crimes, whatever they were. This causes our boy Torin to strengthen his resolve and begin his journey to lands below. As he leaves, the very obviously evil man says something evil.
I'm sure you will.
And we cut to gameplay. So our adventure begins with young Torin and his unreliable cartoon buddy Boogle. First things first, Torin's gotta get those berries over there for later before immediately heading back home because heaven forbid he gets everything he needs before heading out. Upon returning to the homestead, Torin's gotta show that white boys can in fact jump by fetching that rope over there. Then he picks up the axe too for what will be reasons that make 100% sense. That's maybe a little lie, but all things considered, it's one of the more tame stretches in logic. For now though, Torin's gotta head inside and dig into his geriatric mother's knitting basket to play a game of keep away with Mr. Inchy, like so. Yeah, it's as obnoxious as it looks, little jerk. Tragically, Torin will need this little pain soon enough. Torin's also gotta pick up his dad's tobacco pouch, which I forgot to pick up the first time but didn't feel like re-recording, because A, I wanted this done quickly, and B, there was a bug I couldn't recreate in the initial footage, and C, I'm lazy, bite me. But you'll get this sweet, sweet spliced footage while I worry about the hassle of editing it. Both these items are for later puzzles, but may as well have them in hand while we're in town picking it all up. Now we need to make our slow jaunt all the way over to the other side of the starting screen, past the caffeinated worms, over the funny tree full of slugs. I love it. Past all these horrible plants, past the square tree, and all the way down into the valley below where Boogle will completely forget he's supposed to turn small for a bit. That's the bug I'm talking about. I genuinely have no clue how it happened and I could never recreate it no matter what I did. Tragic, honestly. And we will be making this trek a lot. Or at least I will. You'll just be watching the highlights. So past the screen that does nothing, Torin's gotta do a little reading.
In case of emergency, break glass. What could that mean?
Before making handy use of his big ol' axe to crack-a-lack that giant crystal to get the homeowner's attention because knocking and doorbells are overrated. And we need its hard fragment too, I guess. Our boy Torin is greeted by this marvelous specimen of a man. This man here is the old guard manning the station which houses the gate to the lands below. He's ancient, ornery, and loves the sound of his own voice, not unlike me, I guess. Oh lord, does he love the sound of his voice, and there is so much of it. He states he won't leave this place until his replacement shows up, though he says it in far, far more words. Luckily, Torin is a quick thinker, and this man is clearly senile, so like any proper adventure game protagonist, he lies. Torin knocks on the door and lies like a cheap rug, but this man is clearly insane and also just doesn't really seem to care that much. There is nothing going on up there. He's got 2 brain cells rotted and desiccated from old age fighting for 3rd place. His brain is deep fried to the point of being carbon and he doesn't shut up. Let's have a little dialogue for a sec, you and me. Well, more of this cutscene continues for a little while. Let's talk about the game's dialogue. I get that this is a game for kids, but there are times where it just doesn't quite stop talking. I mentioned it earlier, but this game is all or nothing with its dialogue, as in it's either heaps of it or nothing at all with nothing in between. I respect its voice acting to a degree because it's all done pretty well, but it's sometimes too much, and more than once the humor just kind of falls flat. It doesn't even come from the rapid-fire school of comedy where it throws so many jokes out at once that one is bound to land. It just commits too much for too long to some of its bits. It's something that I just didn't remember from my first time playing it as a kid, and heck, even when I streamed it, I leveraged the same complaint and just kind of forgot. Boogle is cool though. So getting back to the game at hand, with all its absurdist writing and unhinged animation, Torin agrees to get this deranged old guardsman his last meal before the changing of the guard. He specifically requests an appetizer of fresh squeezed berry juice, and we just so happen to have the exact berries he wants. Almost like I knew or something. Regardless, after a somewhat dated Chuck Berry reference, the juice is prepared. The greedy geezer then requests an entree of spaghetti and peat balls.
You know what I really miss? Sluggetti and peat balls.
Because nothing can be straightforward in this strange land. As this goes on, I'm actually becoming increasingly sure this man doesn't actually care about the job and is just taking Torin for a ride. Also, something happens in the background during this initially, which I failed to mention because it's one of the more bespoke mechanics of the game. So as was mentioned before, Boogle is like a secondary inventory, but he doesn't pick up items in the traditional sense. He instead mimics things he finds in the environment. There's never really an explanation for it in-game outside of the help menu, and even then, it doesn't fully explain the mechanics of it. Boogle is essentially a walking, not quite talking key. He's also an idiot and a jerk in ways I can't help but find endearing. He's also another part of the puzzle of why I found it so hard to believe this game was real. Regardless, we're hitting up this bog to get these delicious and nutritious peat balls the guardsman so rightly desires. Now, in the first of what will be many bizarre and wildly dangerous actions our hero makes, Torin decides to go bungee jumping for peat moss. Yeah, you heard me. The kid just really doesn't want to come at it from a more reasonable angle. And I guess he is a teen after all, and there's nothing dumber than a teen. Regardless, he was able to get the peat but lost his bag. With no real plan for a way out, Torin needs to swing back to that branch in the foreground to get out safely by clicking back and forth as he swings. And if you don't, well...
You'd be better off worrying about getting off that rope than reaching for your bag.
Regardless, after a bit of swinging and a lack of thinking, our boy Torin makes it to safety. He proceeds to do a sick flip with perfect form from start to finish, before realizing he forgot something. Luckily, Boogle is here to save the day.
My bag. Boogle, stop! What? Boogle?
I ain't gonna lie, this did a lot to make me like Boogle. I can respect a horrible creature that is fueled by the rules of comedy. First part of the recipe down, it's time to get to work on the spaghetti, which will take a lot more effort. Torin's gotta head on down to that big tree sitting in the middle of the initial area and greet these horrible creatures. I said it, I hate them so much. I hate them. They're annoying, they're loud, and gross, but we need to figure out how to get the slugs for the spaghetti. After a bit of back and forth, the snails basically say, "We won't tell you anything unless you get us the biggest, juiciest leaf." Which, like, fine, I just wish they weren't so annoying about it. So Torin's gotta head like 10 feet to the left into a grove to find the biggest, juiciest leaf for those lovely gents. It's a quick and easy little puzzle that involves using Inchy as a leaf detector and playing a game of keep away with the leaf with a whole lot of whoosh and whish, until eventually you get it and help Inchy live out his only feet dreams. Leaf in hand, Torin's gotta head back to the big tree with the little size queens before he had even more dialogue with those weirdos. While they don't believe him at first, they acquiesce after he shows them that large, girthy leaf, much to their astonishment. Also, quick aside, the music that plays while talking to them is so loud it overpowers their voices frequently. Much as I complain about their dialogue, it really takes me out of it even more due to just how loud the goofy music is. It's not bad, just poorly balanced. The snails eventually reveal to Torin that the secret to getting those high-speed caffeinated slugs is moat scum. Delicious moat scum guarded closely by the mighty croctopus. So Torin is forced to play taxi as he ferries those little jerks all the way to the moat outside the walled city. Mercifully, all he has to do is place the snails on their leaf in the moat, and they kindly huck the moat scum at him as thanks. Wonderful. Couple other things to note here. Torin can futz around by the water and learn the consequences of treading upon the croctopus's domain.
The croctopus may well combine the worst characteristics of both animals, but its skin makes an excellent laptop computer case.
He can also try entering the town, but he quickly learns about classism and the tragic realities of being a poor farm boy as the guard basically tells him to buzz off. What a jerk. Now Torin's gotta head on down to the tree where those high-speed caffeinated slugs are, so he can finally make them delicious spaghetti and peat balls. Yum. So how do we catch them, you might ask? Well, unnamed viewer, Torin does something that personally makes me very uncomfortable, and I cannot for the life of me tell you why. He has Boogle all too happily turn into a box and uses the pond scum as bait to trap them and that horrid little creature. Maybe it's because he uses his tongue to prop up the box, maybe it's the weird smug look on his face. I really don't know, but I still hate it. Still, he proves his use by capturing those annoying little slugs. Now Torin has to head back to where the deranged guardsman is to prepare his final meal so he can take over the outpost and get to the crystal treasure within. Torin gives it his best college try in the kitchen to a surprising amount of success. The guardsman proceeds to loudly eat the delightful meal for what feels like an eternity. It's not that long, but it sure feels like it. After enjoying his meal much to my disgust, he then makes one final request from Torin. A dessert of root, whatever that means. So it's time for Torin to head out once more. Luckily for Torin, this request is in fact super quick. Right outside, back on the main road, there's a weird looking tree made of a bunch of roots. And there's one square one jutting out. Torin just needs to ask it to come with him and BAM! Mission complete. Surprisingly quick and simple. Torin decides to make a pie out of the square root as the final dessert. After a long, very labored math joke, the insane guardsman takes Torin in back to help prepare him for his new job of manning the Phenocrystal lands below. He's supposed to guard the Phenocryst from anyone coming up, but Torin's the kind of amoral protagonist who just wants to do his thing. So begins my hell, one of many. I mentioned it before in my Noctropolis video, but this is the kind of puzzle I'm really not great at. It's not as humiliating as anything from Noctropolis, but that is yet to come. I fumbled for a while before eventually stumbling into the proper configuration. And here's where I realized the mistake I made. A small one, but a mistake nonetheless. So remember that tobacco pouch I mentioned during our initial visit to the farmstead? Yeah, so I forgot to get it in my initial footage, so I had to traipse all the way back to the farm to get the little pouch. Either way, it's time to fill that tobacco pouch with that sweet, sweet nose candy. It's time for Torin to leave this terrible place for somewhere worse. Escarpa. A bit of blow and away we go! Screw you, guardsmen, we're out. We're given a relatively short cutscene of the kingdom we saw in the opening, and the current regent learning of the death of the king and queen, as well as the disappearance of the child in the prologue. Soldier on screen is visibly saddened, and the regent is shocked before we hard cut to Escarpa proper. Here begins the trend of Torin making a wonderfully graceful entrance into a world below. He comfortably lands on a small tree before resting too much on his laurels and plummeting below. He narrowly avoids breaking every bone in his body on impact by catching some tile work, only to lose his grip. He lands on the cold, hard stone below and narrowly avoids getting his skull cloven in two by a hideous tile that falls after him. Torin then stands up and pockets the tile, hinting at the importance of the item and also showing off those adventure game protagonist kleptomaniac tendencies. Somehow this won't be his worst entrance by a long shot. At this point I didn't actually know how to save because I hadn't looked at a manual, so it took me way too long to figure out how. I'm not kidding, it took me like 5 whole minutes to figure it out. It's honestly embarrassing. It's a drop-down menu up in the upper left corner, by the by. I know you weren't wondering, but I'm saying it anyway. Also, ignore the shift in aspect ratio. I'd apparently forgotten to turn off a small trim overlay I'd been using to record Noctropolis, which cut off the window border in that game. Congratulations, I've now cursed you with this knowledge. So, moving on, we can properly start Escarpa and our journey into the worlds below. Unfortunately, I started on the worst possible foot with a bit that the game really commits to way harder than it should. The bitter nuts. The whole thing is a joke on old-fashioned sitcoms like The Honeymooners, and I don't know, man, it just ain't for me. I'm not really a sitcom guy to begin with, but this commits to it so hard that I actively chafe against it. I also cannot stand laugh tracks either, and this abuses them to the nth degree as an important part of the bit. After a point, I just started messing with my cursor to keep myself entertained because it was the only thing keeping me from skipping the cutscene. I do apologize if I seem really down on this game because I'm really not, but the flaws become glaring when all you can do is focus on them and review them ad nauseum. I do like a lot of the game, but it also has these jagged edges that I just don't quite jive with. Regardless, it's time to start navigating the cliffs of Escarpa proper for the first time of what will be many. And at least it looks nice. Seriously, the backgrounds here are gorgeous. Torin descends the cliff to see a washerwoman doing laundry, minding her own business. He can choose to talk to her, to no avail. She's so engrossed in her work, she even tries to wash Boogle, but the stains of his sins will never wash out. No amount of bleach can truly cleanse Boogle. On the other side, Torin enters the throne room with the king and queen of Escarpa. Torin introduces himself before being greeted by the odd couple. One, a pompous old man, the other a sassy queen, who mutters insults under her breath before yelling a lie about it. Torin will ask them about Licentia and how to progress to the worlds below, but they are largely unhelpful. They mention their tall, ugly daughter, Lena, and say they're not terribly sure how to get further in, but that Torin should keep an eye out for her. The queen sends young Torin off with a pendant containing family pictures to hand off to their unsightly daughter when he sees her, because despite all her sass, she genuinely does care about her hideous child. More importantly, in the short term, the king mentions his crystal collection in the center of the room and how it's somehow missing something. Torin can hand off the crystal that he's been sitting on since near the start of the lands above, so he can finally complete his collection. Now that he's got the whole rainbow covered, happy Pride Month, the king does Torin the kindness of giving him a ticket to his upcoming royal ball. On the way out, Torin will also steal some gross rotting meat off the king's table because he's feeling peckish and doesn't want to eat his pie or something. With his troublesome ticket in hand, Torin needs to head all the way back to the Bitternut's place, much to my chagrin. Torin can use the pennant to ask Mrs. Bitternut about Princess Lena, and she'll start spouting off a long list of thinly veiled insults. Speaking of thinly veiled insults, after handing her the ticket to the ball, she immediately starts ragging on her husband before saying she owes Torin. So obviously Torin's going to immediately cash on the favor by asking for the green patterned plate on the table. She'll hem and she'll haw before giving in when Junior presses her on it. Unsurprisingly, she also tries pawning Junior off on Torin as well. What a lovely family. I don't know, maybe I'm a weirdo for not finding terrible family dynamics funny. Heading down the cliff once more, further past the washerwoman, there's a funny tunnel Torin can walk into. On the inside are weird green jutting teeth and strange fleshy walls. The room itself tapers off with a green patterned tile in the back and a pit behind it. It's definitely one of the stranger and more striking backgrounds in the game. Upon unplugging the hole, he's immediately assaulted by a foul stench from whatever's in there. Boogle is then ever so kindly forced down that opening by turning into a worm, because would you still love Boogle even if he was a worm? I know I wouldn't. But now that he's trapped in the darkness, Boogle can transform into a very questionably shaped lamp, illuminating the, excrement inside. Torin then forces Boogle to turn into a shovel whose face is on the spade, I might add, and ever so cruelly makes him scoop up the foul substance. Just a whole mouthful of shit. Unsurprisingly, Boogle gives Torin the nastiest look possible before scooping it up in the pitch black darkness. Boogle may be a terrible, capricious little creature, but even this is beyond the pale, Torin. Luckily for Torin, Boogle is very forgiving whatever he is, and happily hands him the fat sack of crap. Getting back outside and going further down the mountain, Torin is greeted by a dual-headed vulture. One is cruel and the other kind, or something like that. They refuse to let him by and needlessly insult him. Well, at least one head does, the jerk. Thankfully though, through the power of basic problem-solving skills, Torin can distract them by sliding that huge piece of meat down the natural slide above, causing the two gentlemen to dive bomb it, abandoning their post. Scene also makes the very smart choice of highlighting the lone tree down below. It's honestly a pretty clever trick for showing that yes, there is something down below if you scroll the screen. Climbing back up around where the vultures were, Torin comes across a large gap across the chasm that he can jump. Upon entering the cave there, Torin's quickly accosted by skunks, forcing him to beat a hasty retreat. Said he needs to climb down the cliff he's on, dropping him off into the servants' quarters with the joining baths down below that. Like any proper adventure game protagonist, he immediately begins pilfering anything not nailed down. First, he starts with their rug, because he clearly deserves it more. This is followed by nicking the regulation fan, the tile on the stand, and even the poor girl's huge pillow. The man has no shame. Reaching the other side of the room, Torin can try climbing down the ladder with dire consequences for doing so.
You've discovered the fast way to get to the lands below.
So instead, it's time to head back up the mountain once more. Gotta get those steps in. Torin's gotta head back up to the washerwoman, this time for realsies. Torin gets up there, he's gotta swap out the sign he just obtained completely legitimately and trade it for the green pattern tile the washerwoman had. And by trade, I mean swap and steal. On his way out, Torin's also gotta get his hands on a clothespin from the socks the washerwoman had hung up, because one theft just isn't enough for our boy Torin. Upon pilfering the pin, Torin mentions aloud they'd be great for the skunk den, so I guess he's gotta use them in the skunk den. Saves me from having to think. Dropping by the skunk den, it's time to pin his nose shut with the clothespin and block all that nasty musk with that sweet rug he robbed. He goes the extra mile of closing in on them and threatening them with the musky mat, causing the two of them to skedaddle. With this, Torin can finally head to the other side of the cave and climb some more. How lucky. After ascending, Torin finds a hairy man at the edge of a cliff, deep in contemplation. Torin, thinking contemplation and introspection are for chumps, decides to interrupt the old ball of fuzz, who turns around and starts speaking to him in the tone of what can only be described as some sort of ethnic stereotype. The old man, with memory problems, starts whining about the green pattern tile he's been sitting on. He peppers in some backhanded compliments about Lena, too. Such lovely people here. To top it off, he offers zero advice on how to find Licentia, instead choosing to dance around the topic. Torin can then trade the tile for the large pillow he'd pinched, causing the strange man to breathe a sigh of relief and tell Torin to huck the tile off a cliff or something. That's it. No answers or anything. Dude just leans back on the pillow content and Torin's got a beat feet. Down the cliffs once more to the servants' quarters post-haste. Back in the servants' quarters, Torin decides it's high time he committed a war crime by dropping the musky mat down the ladder. This, unsurprisingly, causes the women vibing in volcanic vents to vigorously vacate, much to Torin's pleasure. Seriously, he calls them girls with such disgust.
Now that the girls are gone.
Needing that green pattern tile down in the baths, Boogle's got a yo-yo down below Lowe to avoid the ladder that's so-so. He deftly avoids the pit, climbs around the bath, and gracefully grasps the tile at long last. Torin finally has the last tile he needs. Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something, though?
Access to the lands below.
Regardless, our boy Boogle, being the marvelous manifestation of chaos that he is, proceeds to leave out the side door, resulting in one of the better bits in the game. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of jokes in this game are largely hit or miss for me, but Boogle tends to be surprisingly consistent with his hits. Having definitely attained all the tiles,
Access to the lands below.
Torin's gotta head all the way back to the other side of the crevasse and drop the dragon dung onto the tree branch we saw below the vulture's nest. This allows him to safely descend down below to a strange, ornate set of stairs. Always more stairs at this place, I fucking swear. Upon reaching the top of the steps, he's greeted by an empty tile puzzle. Luckily for him, he has all the pieces he needs. Crap. So yeah, I spent way too long to figure out the pattern as I slotted the pieces in, only to realize, whoopsie doodle, I forgot a tile. So I had to go all the way back to the throne room where the thankful king let Torin take the tile. Well, sorta. I didn't actually forget. Torin's not allowed to get the tile up until he accesses the puzzle and is left wanting. He explains the situation with a magnanimous monarch who lets him lift it so he can find a way to open the path deeper to the lands below. Upon returning to the puzzle and slotting in that last piece, it's time to get cracking and solve this lovely puzzle. So the idea is that you're supposed to align the tiles to look like faceless swords. This includes rotating as well as rearranging. Needless to say, this took me way longer than it should have, even knowing I was trying to make a face, because none of it seems to line up at a glance, and instead feels like throwing darts at a wall to see what sticks. While I speed up this footage, let's step aside to chat a little, you and me. You see, this is the place I remembered most when thinking about the game. Escarpa was always lodged vividly in my mind, and I could never forget it as a kid and as growing up. The winding steps, the sheer cliffs, the many strange individuals, and the striking architecture always stuck with me. It's also why I was finally able to recognize the game when I saw it pop up on GOG years ago, because it had a shot of the servants' quarters on there that immediately triggered those memories of the game. At long last I found it, this game that had been for a long time just a strong memory in an otherwise hazy childhood. I wasn't losing it. It wasn't a dream. This was finally it, Torin's Passage. Needless to say, I purchased it on the spot to see what I knew and how much I remembered. I was genuinely shocked how much of lands above and Escarpa I could easily recall, at least. You see, there's a funny thing about your boy Torpo. I don't remember large chunks of my childhood for one reason or another, as I mentioned previously, but a big one, without a doubt in my mind, is the various medications I got prescribed once I was handed down the autism diagnosis as a kid. I know you're thinking, a video essay person with autism, who'd have thunk? Who could have seen this coming? Without getting too into it, I drifted from one med to the next in an effort to treat my autism. Various questionable drugs were used, including antidepressants, and unsurprisingly, nothing stuck. Zoloft did obliterate my memories of an entire chunk of my childhood, though. When I was on that shit, I was in such a haze, and it was a truly terrible experience to have as a kid. Remember, if anyone tells you they can cure autism, they're a terrible person, a grifter, or both. Autism isn't something to be cured, it's just another facet of a person. An explanation more than anything, but I would never call it a disease. Regardless, despite this fragmented memory, I always had these weirdly vivid recollections of very specific moments. like hanging out at a friend's place, playing Donkey Kong Country 3 on his SNES while he blasted his Baby Got Back cassette that he so loved. Honestly, that may have been more formative a memory than I think because of certain tastes of mine. Still, no matter what, the memory of Torin's passage never truly left me, despite it all. It was always there, and while I question if it was real, it was also too vivid to discount until I finally saw it on GOG, cementing the reality of it. It made me very happy to learn it was real after questioning it for so much of my life. I ended up streaming it on my stream channel almost exactly 3 years ago from when this was written, and was pleasantly surprised by it. At least that's what I remembered going into this project. It stuck out in my mind as a solid enough game. Not something that blew my mind, but fun and interesting enough at the very least. And that's how we're here now. Moving on, the puzzle is finally finished. My long nightmare is over. No more waxing nostalgic, or at least close enough to it. The large idol decides to expound at Torin about the miracle of Phenocryst technology and how unified the world once was, as it is no longer. This all feels like a tie into some deeper plot, but the aborted franchise wasn't allowed to go anywhere, so it ultimately feels like flavor with no substance. I don't blame that on the game though, cause Al clearly had some greater plan at play. Still, the idol's mouth opens, revealing stairs because there's never enough here, allowing Torin to make his final ascent in Escarpa. Upon arriving at the Phenocryst, it's time for Torin to do the needful. A bit of blow and away we go! We're greeted by a short cutscene of a kangaroo court finding the royal nanny being tried for the crime of stealing the royal baby and is under suspicion of killing the royal couple. She's quickly sentenced and collared, kinky, for her crimes. The collar itself is one that forces exile upon her, preventing returning to the lands above ever again lest she be choked, also kinky. She's then shunted off to the lands below, never to be seen again. Our boy Torin, ever one for graceful entrances, is flung out powerfully onto a green surface that breaks his fall. It looks like clear skies and large fields, but despite that, leaves were thrown up when he landed. Weird. Torin takes one step and oops! On the forest floor, our poor boy Torin can choose to do nothing and just perish, I guess. Real lack of survival instinct.
After the Pergolans tie you securely to the ground, they bring by all their friends to stare at you. You do not harm them, mainly because you're a skeleton.
Now, if Torin decides to actually say something, they get frightened and run off, except for one who's stuck hanging. Torin grabs the poor guy and gently places him down, saving his life and indebting the Pergolans to him. The Pergolans shunt off their latest capture onto Torin as a sign of good faith. Upon greeting the captive, she just kinda assumes the worst and meets him with nothing but incredulity. Luckily, or unluckily depending on how you look at it, she's conventionally attractive and Torin can't stop himself from fawning over her. Seriously, he's like a dog with a steak hung in front of him, which makes sense since he is a teenage boy. Eventually, Torin has the good sense to show the redhead the necklace the royal couple gave him up in Escarpa, revealing to her that her parents care and never stopped looking for her. On the bright side, she does have a sweet boot knife that she then shows off to Torin, who uses that to free her. She proceeds to get up, they get close, and Torin places the locket around her neck and...
Oh, Boogle.
Now, while we muddle through the long back and forth between Torin and Lena about how hot each other are, let's talk a bit more about Uncle B. So, where we last left off, when I was a teenage slime, I got curious about what had happened. I approached one of my parents and asked them what happened to Uncle B. Why did we stop seeing him and talking to him? Because, to me at least, it felt weird the way we just completely stopped communication. It felt out of nowhere as a kid, so I just wanted to know more about it. At the time, I'd been told we stopped seeing Uncle B because of a dungeon dispute, but wasn't told much else. I'd figured to myself at that point that I understood enough. I just assumed it was because my dad was a jerk and tried screwing Uncle B over because that's just what he does. To put it kindly, my dad sucks, but there's no reason to pick apart my deep-seated daddy issues here. That's a depth too deep for us to plumb today. I already shared enough with the autism stuff. Regardless, that day kinda cemented my image of Uncle B for a long time. To me, he was just another person screwed over by my dad's dungeon mismanagement and narcissism. It wasn't until recently when I realized I still didn't have the full picture. My knowledge was incomplete, but I just kinda took what I was told. It wouldn't be for a long time before I learned that my view of him was much more rosy than reality. Now back to the game at hand and the continuing cutscene, the two of them keep yammering about their messy feelings. Torin thinks she's incredibly hot and can't stop talking about it. Seriously, he just goes on and on about how attractive she is. I mean, she does look like a cross between a scantily clad Disney princess and a character from Leisure Suit Larry. Lena, on the other hand, can't stop talking about how normal Torin makes her feel and how at home she feels like a freak because she's tall, slim, and only has hair in her head. I know, what a weirdo. As a bit of an aside, according to the design doc,
Lena is seriously downplayed in this game, but will provide plenty of material for the sequel. You boastfully announce you'll save her from her dilemma, but she turns out to be a capable heroine in her own right. Eventually you do help her, but only after she saves you from danger first.
we tragically see none of that. Both the sequel and also her doing, well, anything. She's just kind of a damsel in distress for Torin to save with a cool boot knife. She's just kind of eye candy who helps Torin with a little scratch, which leads into somehow Boogle learning how to be a nurse. The cutscene was so long, Boogle was able to get a degree in nursing. He truly is a talented monstrosity. The teens decide they both have their own ways to go, Torin deeper below and Lena higher up back to her royal home in Escarpa. Torin does at least agree to see her once all his affairs are settled. Then they're interrupted yet again, this time by a Pergolan asking if they want to stay for dinner. Tragically, the two of them are impatient teens in too much of a hurry to try the local delicacies, so instead he herds them to a large altar. This is the way to the two Phenocrysts here in Pergola, and honestly the only two real puzzles here. Pergola is super short compared to most everywhere else. It's like 90% cutscene. It's kind of a shame because I love the many greens of the lush jungles of Pergola. From the dense jungle forest to the beautiful rays of light shining down from above, and even some majestic emerald waterfalls we see in the distance. It's one of my favorite places to look at, or at least from what few glimpses we get of it. Now, the first puzzle itself is pretty simple, but I'll go over the basics quickly. The Pergolans are lined up forming a pentagram, and you can move them around two at a time by having them swap places. The goal of the puzzle is to make each line of 4 Pergolans match based on their features. This means that all Pergolans must match 2 different features each. So for example, one Pergolan with a yellow necklace and a red belt will be part of one line of nothing but red belts and another of nothing but yellow necklaces. Another Pergolan with a yellow necklace will also be lined up with Pergolans with pink robes, and so on. It's all fairly straightforward and has a surprising amount of leeway. This is a game for kids after all, but I think it's still a pretty enjoyable puzzle, and also a lot less embarrassing than some other ones. Upon completion, a bunch of green lights appear and the platform they're all on ascends to the heavens! Upon reaching the top, Torin and Lena are greeted by the second puzzle of Pergola. The second puzzle is a bit more complex. Well, sorta. It's a sound-based puzzle where you need to assemble each side based on ascending and descending notes. The wood walls in the background show which side is which. It's messy though because each person in line moves different groups of people on their side, and I never quite figured out who did what, or if only their place in line mattered. Shocking, I know, me brute forcing a puzzle. Well, not 100% brute force, because there's also a physical tell. The more observant of y'all might notice that they're also higher or lower physically based on how high or low their note is. It's honestly pretty clever and useful if you can't hear it for one reason or another, or just kinda suck at music puzzle. After solving the final puzzle of Pergola, the Phenocrysts are revealed, allowing both Torin and Lena to go in their respective directions. They hold hands and say their final goodbyes, but not before Lena warns him against Licentia. The two love-struck teens have one final kiss before Lena disappears from the plot in Torin's thoughts forever. They clasp hands one final time and a bit of blow and away they go. See you never, Lena. We're greeted by a cutscene showing a meeting between two incredibly evil-looking people. One being a squat redhead, who's Licentia, and a thin old man with sharp features and an even sharper widow's peak named Perkin. The two villains have a back and forth revealing that the nanny from the intro would go on to become the evil sorceress Licentia, putting on more than a few pounds in the process and losing even more inches in height. They wax on about how Licentia was done dirty and how only royals can remove the collar placed on her, but it cannot be removed by Pakand until he ascends to the throne, and that can't happen while the boy still lives, whomever that may be. We all know who it is. We cut back to Torin making an actually graceful entrance for the first time, landing properly on his feet in Asthenia. Torin prematurely pats himself on the back for his solid landing from the only properly maintained Phenocryst. He's surrounded on all sides by dark stone, brightly illuminated by volcanic vents that are all over the place. He's surprisingly chill with the bleak atmosphere though. Even the slightly ominous ambient track isn't gonna bring him down. In front of him is an altar of stone with a nice little wooden door in the front. Upon opening it, he finds a small tube full of cleaning wipes that apparently smell like ammonia. Luckily for us, there's only one thing to do, so Torin whips out the wet wipes and cleans off the messy altar, which just says, "Welcome to Asthenia." Oh, Asthenia, my most hated foe. There's nothing welcome about this pit of tedium. A land so miserable, all its inhabitants are gone. Permanently. Seriously, the design doc mentions that they're all dead. Exiting out of the caverns, Torin's greeted by the vast lava oceans of the hellscape that comprises Asthenia. Now there's 3 hotspots on this overworld, but we'll start by heading to the left to be greeted by... Honestly, I have no clue what the hell this is supposed to be. It's like a weird mini-golf course that plays heavily distorted carnival tunes, all while massive stone bowling balls roll around its many winding paths and holes. Also, there's a boat there too. Now the initial cutscene takes quite a while, but after the first you can just hit the skip button, which you likely will need to because holy crap, I cannot imagine sitting through this every single time. You see, our boy Torin needs to collect a bunch of them for an upcoming puzzle, and it took me an unfortunate amount of time to realize it was skippable. But after collecting enough of the burdensome boulder bowling balls, it's time to handle the actual puzzle on the other side of this island. Torin can stop in the middle briefly too to spot a large shutter with a rectangle perched over a triangle, which is a hint to the central puzzle on the island. Once he's arrived on the rightmost side of the island, Torin's greeted by a, you guessed it, a puzzle! It's just a balance puzzle requiring Torin to balance both sides of the seesaw in the middle. That building at the back? Doesn't matter. It's just some building Torin somehow intuits as the Asthenian guard post to the Phenocryst going up. Not sure how I figured it out, but I'll take his word on it. Still, after hucking enough stone spheres in the seesaw, Torin can hop on the other side. If you did things right and put the right number of balls into the opposing cup, the seesaw evens out completely. Or you can bone it and just have Torin either too high or too low depending on how poor your math is. Regardless, once it evens out, an air raid siren plays and a mechanical whirring can be heard off screen. This place is pretty advanced compared to the other lands, I guess. On his way out, Torin's also going to pilfer a ball for the thrill of it. Having left the screen with the seesaw, you can see the overworld has changed a bit, because there's now something in the spot where the shutter used to be. Upon closer inspection, it's revealed to be a big old trebuchet. Maybe things aren't as advanced as I thought. Torin can then crank that shaft and hop into the cup for a wild ride to the next area, but only if he has a bowling ball in his inventory, lest he overshoot. This leads us to... Honestly, I can't hate the little guy, even if the little shit did deserve it. What I do hate, and what I don't deserve, is this upcoming segment. Welcome to one of the 2 reasons I despise Asthenia. This incredibly tedious maze. Oh lord, is it tedious. I will never forgive Lowe's daughter for this segment. She knows what she did. You see, the basic idea for this maze was based upon a drawing she made, before being expanded upon and made more challenging by the designers over at Sierra. It's an effort in only the purest monotony, so I'll skip the worst of it for y'all by speeding it all up because this mess takes up about 11 minutes of footage. You see, you cannot just click on one end of the maze and be done. No, 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 you poor fool. You naive moron. You absolute rube. You dumbass. In this maze, Torin can only move in straight lines based on where you click. This means you need to slowly move him from one end to the other by clicking repeatedly over and over and over until you reach the exit. But wait, there's more. There's a tiny pixel hunt of a wrench you need to pick up before exiting the maze. The best part is, they're on complete opposite ends of the maze, even if they end on the same screen. And guess who accidentally went the wrong fucking way? The linear nature of the puzzles in this game means that nothing is really missable, so you need the wrench to truly finish the maze. But we won't let that get us down. We will persevere. Because at least we will never need to come back here again. Thank goodness. And so Torin picks up the tiny sparkle of a wrench because this segment is the devil, moves on from here forever free of all of this. Upon reaching the end of the maze, Torin is greeted by a strange metallic device. This device is also why he needs to get the wrench. Gotta do a zoom in on the funny object so Torin can take the wrench to it and tighten the bolt a whole bunch while Boogle does whatever it is that awful creature does. Yeah, that's right. All this so Torin could make a small path over lava to the next tedious maze. God, I've used the word tedious a lot. This one just needs you to click from door to door and wait for Torin to finish walking, and boy is it a wait. 6 straight minutes of staring with the occasional click. Now while all this plays, let's wrap up the sad tale of Uncle B. Sad for who? Well, I was just getting to that. So for the sake of this piece, I decided to sit down and have a proper conversation with my mom about the whole Uncle B thing. Around the time I started writing this, I had a bit of an idea. Why not use this story to paint a picture of how I feel about the game and my perception of it? So as I talked to her and I learned a few things, but I need to paint you a picture of what was happening at the time. You see, back when I was around 12, my family was going through a rough patch. My parents were losing their dungeon due to mismanagement by my father, so they ended up having to sell our home and the dungeon, and we had to move. In the interim, we'd be staying at various family members' places, like me staying at my grandpa's for a bit, which, in hindsight, was actually kind of important to my growth as a person and who I'd end up becoming, but that's a whole different story. To further paint this picture, a while before this, my family had helped front him some cash to pay for his house and a rural part of a nearby kingdom, because he was a friend of the family, and particularly my dad. It's actually the whole reason we were able to drive out to visit him in the first place. So my parents, desperate, went to see him to see if he could loan them some cash to help us out while we were between places. You see, around this time, Uncle B had inherited a large amount of money, enough to live comfortably on for a long time to come. Unfortunately, our mutual past and my parents helping him get his home meant surprisingly little at the time, and he basically told them to fuck off. Despite the help they'd given him, despite his comfortable position, despite our family's time together, it all meant little to him, and he was so willing to brush my parents off. That's who Uncle B really was. A selfish, gelatinous cube who could have helped my family when they needed it most and instead left them out to dry. He was not the kind cube I remembered, which was instead a rosier image based on my incomplete information as a kid. My nostalgia for those times had misled me completely about who he was. Funny enough, I don't really feel much about it now. Probably because time has left me so divorced from it, but also my Swiss cheese memory of my childhood. This leaves the feelings kinda muted, honestly. Maybe it's because of my not so great feelings towards my dad and the people in his orbit muddying it too? I don't know, but there's no point in worrying about it now. What's done is done. My point is this: the fallibility of memory and the undue kindness established by nostalgia. How we're often romanticizing our past because our memories are vague or incomplete. How other people's perception can shape those memories. And how frequently it's all half-baked information because our child brains just can't fully understand the depth of the situation or the reality of it. And also because we're kept things from us as kids to help. Because no kid should be shouldering all of that. It's just too much. But that's the deceptive allure of nostalgia. It lets you paint a rosy picture of your past because you just didn't know enough, your frame of reference was off, you were in a comfortable situation, or were sheltered from the harshness of reality. It's kinda how I feel about Torin's Passage. My memories of it as a kid painted as something far more magical and fantastic. A big colorful adventure full of cool things and wonder. Heck, even my memory of my previous playthrough I did on stream made it seem pretty good, though not as magical as what my kid brain thought. I even decided when writing this to listen to my streams and somehow was more critical of it on stream than I remembered. I want it to be clear, nostalgia isn't inherently a bad thing. Sometimes it helps you cope with things, other times they're just nice, warm memories to hold on to. But it's all too easily used to malicious ends. It's how fascism happens. It's how people are driven to extreme conservatism. How the past is used as this comfortable pillow to smother the future. Nostalgia, when looked at uncritically, is used as a tool by the worst people because they yearn for a past where things are better for them before they've ripped apart the very systems that made the past so comfortable for them. The idea that times were better when you were young or a kid because things were cheaper, or you had a nice childhood, or just didn't understand the world at large as a kid. Take me for example. My childhood was dog water. I'm gonna be really real for a sec, no funny roleplay language here. I have fond memories of Uncle B as a kid back in the 90s because I just didn't have a full picture. Because my dad still cared about me at the time before he learned I had autism, and all but left me to my mom while he focused on my brother. Before I fell into a deep chemical depression and had the joys of growing up as a depressed, hormonal, angry teen with terrible friends, and emotionally abusive, whether deliberate or not, parents. The 90s were great for me before Bush caused me to be one of the children who got left behind. Before conservatism and neoliberalism paved a golden path to our modern fascistic zeitgeist. Before a bunch of insanely wealthy men who've grown fat off of stolen wealth, most of whom come from generational wealth, and a shocking number tied to apartheid South Africa, started trying to send our world into a nihilistic death spiral. But you know what? Not everyone was so lucky in the 90s. I've known queer people who had to live on the street when they were young because their parents kicked them out for being true to themselves. I had one Serbian friend who lived through the bombing of their country in the 90s by the US regime. I've known people who lived through the Rodney King riots. The 90s also had things like the repeal of the Glass-Steagall legislation, leading to the 2008 financial crisis, and eventually the nightmare we now live in. It's all too easy to glaze the past and refuse to look to the future because of it. And me, personally, I refuse to be one of those people. I believe we can do better and I want a future where that happens, but focusing solely on the past is no way to do it and never will be. It's important to learn from the failings and successes of the past instead of latching onto it uncritically. The future should never be paid as the price for going back to a past that never existed. It's unconscionable. Obsessing over the past builds nothing and only regresses. Where was I? Oh, right, the maze. It's still going, isn't it? Torin eventually reaches the end of the long walk and is greeted by a simple but lengthy puzzle. Torin needs to step on each of the individual platforms before reaching the end to fully solve the puzzle. It's not hard, it's just slow because you need to wait for Torin to fully animate each and every time he switches platforms. Honestly though, it was a breath of fresh air in these sulfurous, fetid pits because at least I had to think a little bit. But eventually, Torin reaches the other side. After slowly crossing the bridge, he's greeted at long last by the final room of Asthenia. This place felt so long, even if the raw recording was only like 36 minutes. Either way, before freeing himself, he has to solve one final puzzle. This one is a bit more involved, and honestly, I might just be too dumb for this one. Like, way too dumb. I get the basic gist, which is you need to line up the crystals in such a way that the laser on the left passes through all of them to get to the end. That's simple and easy. My problem is I could just never figure out how visually they related to what angle they were going to shoot out at. I just kinda ran on vibes till I eventually finished like so. But at long last, we're free of Asthenia. Thank goodness, be gone forever and never darken my door again. A bit of blow and away we go! We're greeted once more by Licentia conversing with McCann, who can never ever look normal. The man was born to look evil and he'll die looking evil. Licentia herself is feeling the heat as Torin spirals in on her slowly but surely, all while the collar is choking her more and more. So she calls in, "Sweet Christ on a cracker, what the hell is that thing?" Speaking of misbegotten horrors, here's Dreet! And so we come back to... Did he die? I mean... I feel for him as someone who's had multiple concussions in their life, but like, goddamn, he bent that pipe. Well, I guess it's time for the Boogle show. Go avenge him, Boogle! Okay, but for real, it's time for Boogle to take the helm, albeit briefly. Let's go put that nursing correspondence course to the test by nursing Torin back to health. Tragically, this amounts to slapping the crap out of an unconscious man, feebly attempting CPR, being disgusted by mouth to mouth, which is largely pointless anyway, and then gassing Torin with ammonia. All in a day's work for our creature of inexplicable origin. Awake at last, though definitely still concussed, it's time for Torin to move forward up those boxes and into the nearby duct. What follows is quite a bit of crawling and more head trauma. Eventually, though, he reaches an end and, well...
Uh-oh. Boogle, save us! Oh, save us! I said save us, Boogle!
Great job, team! So remember what I said about the game overcommitting to gags and trying way too hard for way too long, even if they fall flat? That's Tenebrous in my opinion. From start to finish. It's a long string of gags that go on way longer than they need to, or at least most of it is. A land of jarring cartoon shenanigans, a number of which I don't find particularly funny. If I wanted that, I'd just play Toonstruck. Maybe I will at some point if I start hating myself. Our boy Torin is hauled off to a kangaroo court by the local PD for harming the local plants. He gets tossed in prison before being dragged before the judge. He does time for his crime while the mad criminal Boogle is left on the outside. While waiting to get arraigned, the fiend in question appears allaying his fears, until Dreep the Creep swoops in to make a big mess bigger. Boogle's hauled off for now, so tragically Torin needs to pay for his crimes. For real though, Boogle's going to be out of the picture for the rest of the game. Honestly, kind of a shame. Torin's hauled out to the judge for his arraignment, only for him to basically dump literally everything he's been through start to finish. Luckily for him, this kangaroo court isn't as hopping mad as expected, so the judge spells it out plainly for Torin with 3 rules. 1. Plants are scarce and must be protected. Damaging them is a huge crime. 2. The judge handles crimes quickly and forcefully. 3. If Torin messes up again, he'll be tossed into the Null Void, whatever that is. With the threats dispensed, Torin's kicked out on his butt and sent on his way, freely unleashed upon Tenebrous. Oh, those poor fools. No time wasted, Torin hits up the sunflower he landed near, who is less than thrilled to meet him. He hammers her with the usual battery of questions. You know, where am I? What's the situation? Have you seen Licentia? All while buttering up this flower to get her to talk. Only real things of note she mentions are recording nut down at the amphitheater, and that the only way there is over a grassy bluff. She promises to help Torin befriend the bluff if he removes the silkworms hampering her roots, so away Torin goes to puzzle solve like a proper adventure game protagonist. First and foremost, he's gonna grip and rip that dead flower from the nearby bush. It is completely safe to mess with plant corpses, I guess. Next, he's gonna pop on to the next screen over to a weeping willow with a sticky trunk who cannot stop lamenting about how nobody listens to him. What follows is a conversation of what can only be described as a solid minute of non-stop tree puns. Wouldn't you believe it though, that tree is a big ol' sap. No oaks about it. With the sap in hand, our boy Torin lathers the leaf in sap and gently smears it all over the sunflower to trap those pesky pests. The silkworms flee when you mouse over them, so using the sap, they get got in the gunk, allowing Torin's slow ass to catch them. Apparently he stopped trying after the inchy incident. The thankful sunflower mentions the silkworms make silk of any color, which will be very important. She's also a sunflower of her word and will do all in her power to spread the good word of Torin's deeds to the nearby grassy knoll. Going back to the sappy oak, it's time for what can only be described as an incredibly annoying and noisy game of hot and cold. If you make any mistakes, it's an instant game over.
Listen carefully, but click.
Torin has to inch his way across the grassy knoll slowly but surely. Tragically, he's alone on the knoll, but he is a straight shooter, so he can get through one side to the other using his brain. But for real, this minigame is infuriating. You basically need to circle your mouse around Torin all while the grass tells you it's safe or not. Constantly, forever, non-stop. Like it's just a wall of noise and it lasts so long.
No way! Nope, no way! Not here!
And it's like that the whole goddamn way across. You can't even tune it out because you're looking for confirmation, so you need to pay extra close attention to it. I was losing my mind. Upon reaching the top of the grassy knoll, Torin gets a clear shot of the amphitheater down below. That's where the recording pervert is, so he's gotta head on down in for the last and somehow longest part of Tenebrous, but not before tripping over his own dick and stepping on a flower. After descending through not one, but 2 empty screens, he arrives backstage. He gets to witness a large bug's crash out, though we never know why. Needless to say, Torin's gonna jack his stuff he so stupidly left near an adventure game protagonist. Moving to the left, he gets to witness yet another crash out, though this one is completely valid.
Hold still. It's tough enough aiming between the two of you. Oops.
That's it! I have had it! I quit!
Quit? Who said that?
I can't take this anymore, you know? There's gotta be a better gig than this. I'm out of here.
Why, you ungrateful. You can't quit. You're fired. And I quit.
Torin then proceeds to attempt to interview the rabbit about Licentia, but all the rabbit with a speech impediment does is talk past him. This whole segment feels like I'm trapped in goddamn Tombstruck and the rest of Tenebrous will feel like this. That's not a compliment for those wondering. There's no love in my heart for that travesty. Just get in the hat, you sorely lacking Lappin. Unfortunately, the harried hair really enjoys the hat. Like, really enjoys it. Maybe a little too much. I know this because he goes on way too long about how incredible the amenities are. If nothing else, he's a much more relaxed rabbit now. Also gotta grab that bow too. Torin then pilfers the poster from the nearby blind magician because he's an amoral adventure game protagonist. He approaches the spectacle stage magician, named Zippy, and the two of them do another bit that goes on for a while about how he sucks at magic tricks and bemoans his lack of tricks, ending on a decent joke, but honestly I don't know if it was worth the labored setup. Either way, once they chat, Torin needs to hand him the, and I quote, fine silk-lined cap he can live in. Honestly, he can keep the hat full of hair. We then get a trick serial joke to cap it off before the magician begs Torin for a wand to wizard with. So here's where we talk about a gimmick with this area that isn't super obvious right away. Things progress backstage as you take certain actions and circle around it, because the screen itself wraps around. So our boy needs to walk around until certain items appear, and wait, is that girl in the tower? That song lives rent-free in my brain and I hate it because it's not even good. Either way, as Torin circles around aimlessly, he's got to pick up a set of bagpipes for later, before approaching the sound engineer just vibing in the corner. Torin, being Torin, decides to talk to the man as loud as possible before realizing he's being too loud. By the time he brings the energy down to a whisper, it's already too late according to the man. Luckily, this is the audio engineer we've been looking for. Torin and the man have a bit of a back and forth involving Torin patting the crap out of his resume and the sound engineer mentioning how all paths to the Null Void were closed off because it was too dangerous. After grilling the Serene sound guy, Torin learns that he's heard Licentia before and even recorded her voice because his special interest is rare voices, and he makes it a point to record them. To this end, Torin proposes a trade, a recording of the voice of someone from the lands above in return for Licentia's voice crystal. Luckily for him, the man agrees in a heartbeat because Tenebrous is so deep down at this point that it's significantly harder to meet someone above than from below. The audio file eventually relents with just the slightest bit of pressure and snaps off a crystal for recording. Torin decides to go on a completely off-the-cuff rant about his journey so far, with all the anger he can muster before the sound guy tells him to stop because it's only a 10 meg crystal. I mean really, who would do that? Just go on a rant out of the blue. Well, either way, he tosses the crystal to Torin and it's time to go. Now, back to the gimmick of the backstage. He introduces himself to the strange woman pacing about before she tells him to buzz off. She says she'll call him when she needs him for a scheduled act as a saw artist, whatever that is. Torin responds incredulously, despite clearly being scheduled. Poor guy clearly forgot he signed up. He needs to start cycling over and over until the backstage worker leaves his saw unattended so he can steal it. Anything not nailed down is asking to get stolen when he's around. He then uses the saw to saw the cane, so ta-da, it's a magic wand! Zippy is thrilled with this, but only after mentioning to Torin that he's blind, not stupid, as Torin tries to fleece him with the fake wand. Zippy asks for a silkworm handkerchief for his act, and mercifully, Torin already has all the pieces. He uses the silkworms he trapped and kidnapped to print the cloth for the occasion. Zippy trades him his spellbook for the silk because he just doesn't read as much as he used to. Same, Zippy, same. Torin then needs to cycle around yet again, this time waiting for the gymnast to disappear. He yanks their rosin, which is a thing I didn't know about until playing this a few years back. It's a piece of resin used to give musical bowstrings more grip and help athletes grip better. Congrats if you learned something new today. Now it's a matter of applying the rosin to the bow and it's time to get on stage. What happens next can only be described as an affront to good taste, and I'll spare your ears. The cop who was in the crowd the whole time hauls Torin off to court for his crimes against music. This then gets him sentenced to the Null Void for his crimes, which ultimately is where he wanted to be anyway. Happy day.
Here we are, boy. Now you stand over there. Hey! Good riddance, plant crusher.
Okay, it could have been happier without the whole slamming Torin into a wall obliterating his inventory. But, much like a country girl, Torin makes do. Welcome to the Null Void, the free fall at the center of the planet where gravity pulls equally from all directions, giving it this air of weightlessness or zero-G. Before we cover maneuvering though, Torin's gotta pre-bake a puzzle so as to cut out the middleman. You see, when we get to Licentia's place, we're gonna need to lure out her gargantuan goon, the misbegotten monstrosity Dreep. To do this, we need to take the crystal we got from the audio engineer that goes,
You're not welcome here, you decrepit old creep.
and rearrange the shattered remnants of the crystal with Licentia's voice after some jerk slammed us into the wall breaking it, and turn it into
Creep, come here.
easy as. Now with it saying,
Creep, come here.
Torin's gotta drop it into the Null Void like a bad habit for reasons that will become evident shortly. Until then, Torin's gotta figure out a way to maneuver around the zero-G free-for-all that is the Null Void. So since that police officer stereotype vacated our inventory for us, there's only two possible things we can use. The spellbook and the bagpipes. Luckily there's no gravity, but there is air. So our boy Torin's gotta get good at the bagpipes real fast to shoot and zoom every which way down to that tiny door in the background right over there. Maneuvering is determined by clicking a direction and holding for force. It feels exactly as bad as it looks, and it already looks pretty rough. Gauging force and how that correlates to distance is really hard, and to top it off, it's a faux 3D, so it makes gauging position that much harder. Because yes, it's supposed to be 3D. Be thankful that all you need to listen to here is my dulcet tones though, because on top of dissonant bagpipe noises,
Creep, come here.
is playing on repeat in the background. If this isn't what madness sounds like, I don't know what is. Upon arriving at the door, Torin's gotta do the old ding-dong ditch. Because when he rings that bell, he's gotta move real fast, because Dreep is a very responsive doorman, and will completely and utterly destroy Torin on contact if he sees his gormless ass.
Creep, come here. Come here.
What a shame. To come
Creep.
But, if Torin casually waltzes around the step and waits underneath, Dreep will be drawn away by the clarion call off in the distance and strand himself completely in the void. Congrats on being rid of that hapless horror forever, Torin! Upon entering Licentia's lair, Torin's greeted by a bunch of people trapped in crystal, including his parents, Boogle, Sailor Saturn, Darth Vader, Yoda, Charlton Heston, and Al Lowe. All the greatest hits. Either way, there she is, the Queen of Chaos herself, Licentia. She's over there playing with her kid's science set or something. Menacingly. Look at the colors. That's how you know she's dangerous. So obviously Torin has to use the magic book he got from the blind magician to do the old switcheroo with Licentia. She is, as a powerful sorceress, not amused at all with Torin's parlor tricks and instantly turns the tables because Torin had no real endgame here. He's operating on pure id at this point. She goes to beat his pasty ass, but is quickly choked out by her collar, with the time on it having finally run out. Torin panics and touches the collar, disabling it completely, and Licentia then springs to life and gives him the strongest backhand of his life, knocking him into the next century. Luckily for Torin's ineffectual ass, his shirt collar slips, revealing his super freaky birthmark, showing him to be royalty. It's then that Licentia finally realizes the error of her ways, and rouses him from his slumber and reveals that she lost some height and put on some pounds since the start of the game. Licentia reveals to Torin his family is safe and that Torin was royalty the whole time. Unfortunately, Pecan is having absolutely none of it and steps in revealing that he was the real villain the whole time. Pecan decides to finally play his hand by attacking Torin head on before getting his ass beat. Because, let's be real, Torin's in his prime and Pecan is an old codger. So Pecan, being the upstanding fellow he is, decides to threaten Licentia's life to get Torin to play ball. And here we are, presented with the final puzzle of the game. Torin has to sidle up to those crystals in the background before using his fancy magic book to, poof, swap places with Pecan. Pecan slips and falls into the funny liquid that is apparently Dreep's drinking bowl. He tries to make one last attempt before getting the crap tased out of him by Licentia and turned to crystal. From here, Licentia decides to take everyone home!
Hey, Licentia! But the lava.
Oh, Torin. That's not lava. That's Dreep's supper dish.
What about my parents and Boogle?
Of course. Torin, I think it's time for all of us to go back home, to the lands above.
Torin, where's my tools? From town, remember?
Son, who's this lady? And is she gonna stay for dinner?
And that's it! Game over! Day 1! There's nothing else to see! It just kinda ends cause Lowe was expecting 4 sequels he never got. Instead, we're left with a bunch of dangling threads and no way to sew them together. But regardless, that's Torin's Passage. Honestly, as I am, I was probably never going to love this. I just remembered liking it more my other 2 times playing it for very distinct reasons. The first time was as a kid, and the memory of it was fuzzy as hell outside of certain distinct shots, and I already gave you my whole spiel about nostalgia. The second time I was streaming it and I had to focus on more than just the game, like chatting with the chat and futzing around for entertainment, so I was distracted. This time around I was recording by myself and focusing on the game alone, which made all its flaws more glaring to me because it was just me in the game, no distractions. Anything I could gloss over or muddle through in those other 2 situations wouldn't happen here. Funny enough, I was actually more critical of when I played it 3 years ago on stream than I'd remembered. I decided to listen back to my old 4-hour stream out of curiosity, and chewed into this game a bit more than I recalled starting this. I had some very pointed complaints about it, such as, the game either never talked at all or didn't know how to shut up and there was no in-between. I wanted to be clear, critical as I may be, I think it's a solid albeit flawed game. I know this spiel sounds familiar. It's at times very funny, or at times a very gorgeous game. It just, when it would fall flat, it felt really flat. For all its good jokes, solid bits, or beautiful environments, there were their own share of rough or tedious puzzles, or jokes that went on way too long for their own good, overcommitting to the bit. Problem is, I'm just not really the target audience, and that's fine. I think it's a good game, just not for me. I did find Boogle weird, but grew to appreciate his antics more as I worked on this. His nonsense doesn't always land, but he definitely has some of the best bits in the game. It is a game stuffed to the brim with heart and was clearly something near and dear to the crew making it, Lowe included. There's so many little fun Easter eggs, so many good bits, so much fun with the humor, and don't get me started on the backgrounds, they're so gorgeous. All of it is there fully on display, and it kinda makes me wish I liked the game more than I do. But it's just not for me. That said, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Al as well as the folks that poured their hearts into this. If you hear this at all, Al, thank you for the experience. It may not have been for me, but I appreciate it for what it is. It's just a shame it never got to be fully fleshed out like it deserved. It's just such a shame that suits ruin everything like usual. To that end, I wanted to use my own personal experiences to convey this. Convey my own muddled history both as a person and with the game. While working on this, I'd been spending time with a friend while he was playing Pathologic 3, and at some point we had a big conversation about nostalgia and the nature of conservatism. How nostalgia is frequently used as a tool to lead people astray. It's something all too easy to get lost in, and it's what I was thinking of when I made this and thought about my past with it. But I've said more than enough about that already. There's some stuff I had to leave on the cutting room floor, but I figure I'll mention some of them here. 1. There's a super secret Sailor Moon Easter egg in the lava maze. You gotta rub up against the side real tight to get into a secret lava maze. It will then take you to the lower corner where you'll find a bit of background Torin's legs can pass through. If you pay close attention to the gaps, you can see they spill out Sailor Moon and Hiragana. 2. I'm gonna show you a screenshot of one night I took some sleeping meds and tried to write like a genius. As you can see, it went great. For some reason it was cut from the script though. Now, before I get deeper into the behind the scenes and the afterword, I do have a few things I need to say. You know, for the algorithm. If you enjoy this all and stuck around to the end, I'd appreciate you liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Also comment if you wanna with your own opinions or experiences with the game. It really helps these videos spread and the channel grow, and it's always reassuring when people tell you they enjoy your stuff. I'm allowed to be a little vain. I even have a Ko-fi and Patreon in the description if you want to throw any cash my way, because it would be greatly appreciated and they come with their own benefits. And anything helps, but you don't gotta. I'll also toss a link down below to my streams and stream archives if you're ever interested in something more off the cuff from me, or just want to say hi. Now, for a bit of an afterword, I want to extend my thanks to my friends who supported me throughout this. I'm so thankful to them, cheering me on even as I dragged my feet writing this. They've all been so good to me, and I appreciate them all for that, even if I can't say it to their faces. Look, we've all got our character flaws. Also, quick shout out to Lowe for being a cool dude. I enjoyed listening to his interviews and reading his site for info. He's very personable and a really solid storyteller, and just fun to listen to. He's also pretty kind and even answered a question I had about the game. So once again, thanks Al if you're listening. I appreciate it a lot. Now, the production side of this took me way too long to put out, and I apologize to y'all for that. I'd been dealing with a bunch of personal stuff and also found it harder to write this than Nectropolis because of all the messy feelings wrapped up in it. I'm not used to emotional pieces, and I'm really not great at opening up. I mean, I'm not really sure how well I did it, and it was definitely messy, but I will stand by it. I enjoyed the process, and the expression involved. I had already made peace with putting myself out there with these, but I'll be real, I didn't expect so much so quickly. I also wanted to try something different too. I'm feeling around to see what I want and am comfortable with, and what comes to me best, and I'm happy with people coming along for the ride. This was originally meant to be something quick and simple to tide me over till the next one, which is also a bit different. It got out of hand way too quickly though, as this should be evident of. Initially it was going to be straightforward like Noctropolis, then it was going to be about my feelings on children's media and what is good or acceptable. But eventually, because of those pathologic streams and also my own personal history with the game, and my messed up childhood, this is what came out. Like a regurgitation of the soul. I'm hoping the next project goes smoother, and it will be different. A longer, more free-form game than the two that I've done so far, and something modern at that. I love it though, and I hope y'all do too, whenever that comes out. With all that said, I think it's time to wrap things up here. Old Torpo's headed back into his secret room in the hidden dungeon for now, though. Don't want the secret boss, the harbinger of the end, destroyer of kings, or whatever dumb title he chooses this time waking up, now do we? I hope y'all had fun, because I know I did. I'll see you in the next one. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, however much that might be. Though, before signing off, I will say one final thing. Why, I had a personal message from Lowe at the end. Did you?